This story is titled, Mom Who Abandoned Me for Her New Family Now Wants to Reconnect Because She Done Something. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit. I, 23 female, have no idea what to do. My mom, Laura, 50 female, has been trying to reach out to me after 7 years of complete silence. I haven't responded yet, and honestly, I'm torn. Part of me wants to just block her and move on. But the other part, I don't know. To give you some context, my relationship with my mom has always been complicated, to say the least. Growing up, I didn't feel like her daughter so much as her responsibility, a burden she had to deal with after my dad passed away when she was pregnant. When I was 8, my grandparents, who had been raising me, passed away. They were incredible people, kind, loving, and everything a little kid could hope for. Losing them was the first major blow of my life, but it was nothing compared to what came next. After my grandparents died, my mom had no choice but to take me in. By then, she was married to this guy named Carl, who had a teenage son, Brad. From the minute I walked into their house, I could tell I wasn't welcome. Carl made sure I knew I wasn't part of their family. Carl was one of those people who didn't need to yell or hit you to be cruel, though he did plenty of yelling. He'd find these little ways to chip away at me, constantly reminding me that I wasn't really his responsibility. He called me names like charity case and freeloader, sometimes even when I was sitting right next to Mom. I'd look to her, hoping she'd say something, but she'd just shrug it off or laugh like it was no big deal. Then there was Brad. At first, he mostly ignored me, which I thought was fine. But as I got older, his attitude shifted. He'd corner me when no one else was around and say things like, "You should be nicer to me if you want to stay here." At first, I thought he just meant chores or something, but then his tone got weird. He'd stand too close, make comments about how I was growing up. I hated it. I started avoiding him altogether, staying out of the house as much as possible. Mom, of course, turned a blind eye to all of it. If I ever tried to tell her what was going on, she'd roll her eyes and tell me I was being dramatic. She'd say I needed to stop being so sensitive, or that I should try harder to get along with Carl and Brad. I tried to make her proud in other ways. I threw myself into school, joining every club I could and working hard to get good grades. I thought maybe if I was successful enough, she'd finally notice me, finally care. But no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. I'd bring home straight A's, and she'd barely glance at my report card before dismissing me with a, "That's nice, Emily. Don't let it go to your head." What hurt the most, though, was watching the way she treated Carl and Brad. She doted on them, going out of her way to make sure they were happy. She'd laugh at Carl's dumb jokes and talk about how smart and handsome Brad was to anyone who'd listen. Meanwhile, I was just there. There's one Christmas I'll never forget. I was about 10, and we were all sitting around the tree opening presents. Carl and Brad got these big, expensive gifts, an Xbox for Brad and some fancy gadget for Carl. When it was finally my turn, I opened a small box to find a pair of plain socks. That was it, just socks. Carl smirked and said, "At least your feet won't freeze." Mom laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I remember sitting there, holding back tears, telling myself not to let it bother me, but it did. The thing is, I didn't realize how messed up it all was at the time. I thought it was normal for your mom to criticize you more than she praised you. I thought it was normal to feel like you were always in the way, like you had to earn your place in your own family. When I turned 16, I'd officially hit my breaking point. I just couldn't do it anymore. Living in that house felt like trying to survive with a weight strapped to my chest, constantly dragging me down. I don't even know how I lasted that long. What finally pushed me over the edge wasn't some dramatic blowout or major event. It was just this dull, constant realization that nothing was ever going to get better. Carl would always find a reason to belittle me. Brad would always find new ways to creep me out. And Mom, she wasn't going to change. One of Mom's old friends, honestly, I don't even remember her name now, noticed how miserable I was. I think she could tell I didn't belong in that house. She knew my mom well enough to know how she operated, so maybe that's why she felt bad for me. Anyway, one day she casually brought up my dad's sister, Aunt Lisa. She said Lisa had been asking about me and wondered if I might want to meet her. At first, I wasn't sure. I barely knew Lisa. I'd never met her. But then I thought, what do I have to lose? The first time I met up with Lisa, I could tell she wasn't like my mom at all. Lisa was blunt in a way that almost felt harsh, but it wasn't mean, just direct. She didn't sugarcoat anything, and she definitely wasn't trying to impress me. It felt refreshing, though. Like for the first time, I was talking to someone who didn't have a hidden agenda. We started hanging out more after that. Lisa would take me out for coffee or lunch, and we'd just talk. She didn't push me to spill my guts, but I think she could tell I was holding a lot in. Slowly, I started opening up. I told her about Carl and his constant put-downs, about Brad and the way he made my skin crawl, and about Mom's complete indifference to all of it. Lisa didn't react the way I thought she would. She didn't freak out or get overly emotional. She just listened, nodded, and said, "That's not okay." After a few months of this, she finally said something that changed everything. "Emily, you don't have to stay there. If you want to leave, I'll help you." At first, I didn't even know what to say. The idea of leaving felt so impossible, like a fantasy. But Lisa wasn't kidding. She said I could come live with her. No strings attached. It would just be the two of us, figuring it out together. That night, I went home and thought about it. I mean, really thought about it. I stared at the ceiling in my tiny room, aka the laundry room with a twin bed shoved in it, and asked myself if I could handle one more year of this. The answer was a hard no. The next night, I told Mom I was moving out. She was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, and I just came out with it. "I'm leaving." She froze for a second, then turned around with this smug little smirk. "You think you're too good for us now?" "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I just think I deserve better than this." Carl walked in at that exact moment, like he had radar for drama. He leaned against the counter with that disgusting smirk he always had when he was about to say something. "You're lucky we didn't throw you out years ago." I didn't even flinch. "Well, now I'm saving you the trouble." Mom started ranting about how ungrateful I was, how I didn't appreciate everything they'd done for me. It was the same script I'd heard a million times before. And honestly, I just let it roll off my back. I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to argue with her. The next day, I packed up what little I had. A couple of old suitcases, a backpack, and a shoebox of random stuff I didn't want to leave behind. Lisa showed up in her beat-up car to help me load everything up. As I was leaving, Brad leaned against the front door, watching me with that weird, smug expression. "You'll be back," he said, like he was so sure of himself. I just rolled my eyes and walked out without looking back. Moving in with Lisa wasn't glamorous by any means. She lived in a small apartment that was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. But for the first time in my life, I felt safe. I didn't have to tiptoe around, worrying about what Carl might say or what Brad might do. I could just breathe. Lisa gave me space to figure things out. She made it clear that I was welcome in her home for as long as I needed, and that meant everything to me. I think that's exactly what I needed. Someone who wasn't going to judge me or make me feel like a burden. Someone who believed I deserved better and actually did something about it. Those first few weeks with Lisa felt like the start of a whole new life. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. So, for 7 years, my life has been pretty simple, or at least it felt like. I focused on getting through high school, then college, and building a life where I didn't have to rely on anyone who didn't actually care about me. College was a grind, but honestly, it was a good kind of busy. Between classes, part-time jobs, and the occasional late-night study session with friends, I didn't really have time to think about my mom or all the stuff I left behind. Lisa and I had our little routine. She's not the type to hover or get all in your business, but she's always been there when I needed. We'd binge watch terrible reality shows on Friday nights, cook random stuff we saw online, well, mostly her. I'm awful in the kitchen, and just do life together. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and I needed that more than anything. One morning, Lisa made me sit at the kitchen table while she put the kettle on for tea, which is basically her solution to everything. Once she set the mugs down, she sat across from me and looked like she was trying to figure out how to start a conversation. Lisa's not exactly a soft and fuzzy kind of person, so I could tell she was gearing up to say something serious. "There's something I never told you," she said, finally breaking the silence. That got my attention. I straightened up a little, trying to read her face. "What is it?" She sighed, running her hand through her hair like she was annoyed with herself. "When you were younger, I tried to reach out to your mom to be in your life. I wanted to help, but she shut me out completely. She told me you didn't need anyone else, that you were her responsibility." I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. "She kept me from you?" Lisa nodded, and for the first time since I've known her, she looked genuinely upset. "Yeah, I didn't push back as much as I should have. I didn't want to make things worse for you." I didn't even know what to say. All those years I spent feeling completely alone, thinking nobody cared, and Lisa had been right there, trying to help. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "She didn't want anyone interfering," Lisa could. "I think she was afraid I'd see how bad things really were, and she wasn't wrong. If I'd known," she trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm sorry, Emily. I should have done more." Hearing her say that broke something. Lisa has done everything for me since I walked out of that house. The idea that she still feels like she failed me, it made me want to cry all over again. "It's not your fault," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You did more for me than anyone else ever has." She reached across the table and gave my hand a quick squeeze. "I just hate that she kept you from having something better. You deserved better." Isis, I'd spent so many years telling myself that maybe she just didn't know how to be a mom, that she was doing the best she could with what she had. But now I wasn't so sure. For the first time, I let myself really think about the possibility that my mom's choices weren't just about survival or fear. Maybe she liked having control. Maybe she didn't want me to have someone else in my corner, because that would have made it harder for her to guilt trip me or keep me under her thumb. For years, my mom was a non-factor. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't even pop up on social media to like anything I posted. It was like she just erased me, and honestly, I was fine with that. I'd made peace with the fact that I'd probably never hear from her. Fast forward to last week, and that bubble I'd been living in popped. I came home from work, tossed my bag on the couch, and noticed a package sitting on the kitchen table. Lisa must have brought it in, but she was out running errands, so I didn't think much of it at first. Then I saw the handwriting on the box and my stomach flipped. It was my mom's. There was no return address, but I knew it was from her the second I saw it. For a solid 5 minutes, I just stared at the thing, debating whether or not to even open it. Part of me wanted to just chuck it in the trash and forget it ever showed up. But the other part, the one that's annoyingly curious, couldn't let it go. So I grabbed a pair of scissors, sat down at the table, and opened it. Inside, there was a necklace. Not just any necklace, though. It was her necklace. This cheap gold chain with a little charm that she used to wear all the time when I was a kid. It was weird seeing it after all these years, like a ghost from a part of my life I'd tried so hard to forget. Underneath the necklace was a folded piece of paper. I didn't even have to read it to know it was from her, but I unfolded it anyway. It said, "Emily, I don't know how to start this, but I want to say I'm sorry. I made so many mistakes, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want a chance to talk to you, to explain everything. Please, give me that chance." I read it twice, then a third time, like I was trying to figure out if it was real. My mom? Apologizing? Asking for a chance to explain everything? It didn't feel real. I put the letter and necklace back in the box and shoved it in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with it. And honestly, I didn't want to do anything with it. When Lisa got home, she immediately knew something was off. She's not one to beat around the bush, so she came right out with, "What's up with you? You've been weird since I walked in." At first, I didn't want to tell her. I knew she'd have opinions, strong ones, and I wasn't ready to hear them. But Lisa has this way of getting the truth out of you. So eventually, I just handed her the box. She opened it, read the letter, and let out this loud sigh. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, shaking her head. "What do I do?" I asked. "You don't do anything," she said, shoving the box back at me. "You don't owe her a damn thing, Emily. Not your time, not your energy, nothing. She's only reaching out because she wants something." That hit me like a ton of bricks because deep down, I knew she was probably right. But even then, I couldn't shake this tiny voice in the back of my head saying, what if she's serious? What if she's really sorry? I spent this week trying to push it out of my mind. I threw myself into work, went out for coffee with a friend, and even reorganized my closet just to keep myself busy. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about that box sitting in my drawer. Then, a few days ago, I got a voicemail. It was my mom. "Emily," she started, her voice shaky, like she'd been crying. "It's me. Please, call me back. I need to talk to you. I miss you so much. I've missed you every day. Please call me." Hearing her voice after all these years did something to me. It brought back all these memories I thought I'd buried. Good ones, bad ones, all of it. I sat there, staring at my phone, replaying the voicemail over and over. When I told Lisa about it, she looked like she was ready to march over to my mom's house and tell her off. "She doesn't get to waltz back into your life and pretend like nothing happened," she said. "Where was all this missing you when she was letting Carl treat you like crap? Where was it when you needed her?" She wasn't wrong. But part of me still couldn't help wondering if maybe my mom had changed. People grow, right? They learn from their mistakes, or at least that's what everyone says. What if this was her way of trying to make things right? I haven't called her back yet. I don't even know what I'd say if I did. A big part of me wants to just delete the voicemail, block her number, and move on. But another part of me keeps thinking, what if? So, yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm stuck, trying to figure out if I should give her a chance or keep the door shut. What would you do? Would you call her back? Or is it better to leave the past in the past? Update 1 high again. Reddit. First of all, thank you so much for all the advice and support on my last post. I honestly didn't expect that many people to respond, and it's been really eye-opening. I read through most of the comments, and the majority of you were pretty skeptical about my mom's intention. A lot of you said she seemed like she was only reaching out because she wanted something, and that her apology felt insincere. I can't say I disagree, but it's hard not to feel conflicted when it's your mom. You know? Some of you also brought up the idea of meeting her just to get closure. Not necessarily to reconcile, but to see if she'd own up to anything. I think that stuck with me the most. I don't know if I believe she's capable of changing, But the idea of finally hearing her say the words, "I was wrong" or "I'm sorry," was enough to make me consider it. So, after a lot of back and forth with Lisa, who, by the way, was very firmly in the block her and move on camp, I decided to meet my mom. But I had a few ground rules. First, it had to be in a public place. No way was I meeting her at her house or anywhere private. Second, Lisa was coming with me. There was no way I was walking into that situation without backup. We picked a restaurant downtown that's always busy. It's loud, the tables are close together, and it's definitely not the kind of place where you can make a scene without a dozen people notice. I figured the setting would keep things somewhat controlled, or at least manageable. The day of the meeting, I was a nervous wreck. Lisa tried to keep things light. She even cracked a joke about bringing popcorn to watch the drama unfold, but I could tell she was just as uneasy as I was. When my mom walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, with more gray in her hair. But her eyes? Those were the same, cold, calculating, and scanning the room like she was already on the defensive. Then she saw Lisa sitting next to me, and her whole expression changed. She froze for a second before stomping over to the table. "What's she doing here?" she snapped, loud enough for a couple of people at nearby tables to glance our way. Lisa just sat there, calm and unbothered. "She's my family," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. Mom sat down across from us, her face twisting into this ugly sneer. "She's the reason you abandoned me. She turned you against me." I wanted to laugh at how ridiculous she sounded, but Lisa beat me to it. "I didn't have to turn her against you, Laura," she said cool. "You did that all by yourself." Mom ignored her and turned her attention back to me, her eyes welling up with tears. "You have no idea what I went through, Emily," she said, her voice cracking. "I did the best I could for you. I was young and scared." I felt my stomach twist. "You didn't do your best," I said, keeping my tone even. "You let Carl treat me like garbage, and you let Brad—" I stopped, my throat tightening. Her tears dried up almost instantly. She rolled her eyes and waved me off like I was being dramatic. "You're overreacting! Carl and Brad were fine. You're just too sensitive." That was it for me. Any lingering doubts I had about her sincerity vanished in that moment. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "We're done here," I said, my voice calm but firm. Lisa got up with me, and we walked out together. I didn't look back, but I could feel the stares of everyone in the restaurant as we left. Once we got outside, Lisa turned to me. "You handled that better than I ever could have," she said. But honestly, I didn't feel like I'd handled anything. Walking away didn't feel empowering. It felt hollow, like I'd just wasted my time hoping for something I was never going to get. The drive home was quiet. Lisa didn't push me to talk, which I appreciate. I think she could tell I was still trying to process everything. When we got back to the apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not because I missed my mom, or even because I was sad. It was more like a release. Years of anger and disappointment bubbling to the surface all at once. Lisa sat with me, didn't say much, just let me get it all out. When I finally calmed down, she said, "Emily, you've done everything you could. You gave her a chance, and she blew it. That's on her, not you." She was right, of course, but that didn't make it any easier. The truth is, I don't know what I was expecting from that meeting. Maybe I hoped she'd own up to her mistakes, or at least acknowledge the pain she caused me. Maybe I just wanted her to say she was proud of me for building a life for myself despite everything. But instead, I got the same selfish, dismissive woman I grew up with. I don't think I'll ever understand why she is the way she is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I don't need to understand her to move on. So yeah, that's the update. I'm not sure if I'll hear from her again, but I think I'm done chasing closure. Thanks for reading, and thanks for being there while I try to figure all this out. You guys have no idea how much it means to me. If anything happens, I'll update you. Update 2. Hi again, Reddit. First off, thank you for all the advice and support on my last update. I've been reading through your comments, and it's been a mix of comforting, validating, and downright helpful. A lot of you pointed out just how manipulative my mom's behavior seems and how it's clear she hasn't changed. One comment really stood out to me. It said, "The fact that she keeps making this about her shows, she doesn't care about closure or making amends. She just wants something from you." That hit me because deep down, I think I already knew that. But knowing it and accepting it are two very different things. So, after the restaurant fiasco, I was ready to move on. Or at least try to. I thought my mom would back off for a bit after embarrassing herself so publicly. Maybe she'd send another sad voicemail or some passive-aggressive text about how ungrateful I am. But I figured that'd be the extent of it. Turns out, I underestimated just how entitled she really is. A couple of days ago, I got another voicemail from her. But this time, it wasn't the usual, "I miss you, please call me back" nonsense. No, this one was different. And not in a good way. "Emily, I need to talk to you. It's important," she said, her tone sharp and businesslike. I'm going to come by your apartment tomorrow so we can sort this out. I'll see you then. I had to replay it twice just to make sure I heard her right. She said she was coming to my apartment, not asking to come over, not inviting me to talk, just flat out I'm coming. I immediately texted Lisa, who was at work, to let her know what was going on. She replied with, "Oh, hell no," followed by about 5 angry face emojis. I spent the rest of the day going back and forth in my head about what to do. Should I just not answer the door and pretend I wasn't home? Should I let her talk and see what she had to say? Or should I confront her and set some firm boundaries? None of those options felt great. Lisa got home that evening, and the first thing she said was, "If she shows up, we're shutting this down. You don't have to do this alone." The next afternoon, sure enough, there was a loud knock at the door. Lisa and I exchanged looks, and she muttered, "Here we go," before heading to open it. There she was, my mom, standing in the hallway, looking equal parts desperate and pissed off. She didn't even wait for an invitation before saying, "Can I come in?" Lisa blocked the doorway, arms crossed. "Why are you here, Laura?" "I need to talk to my daughter," she snapped, glaring past Lisa at me. "Anything you have to say to her, you can say right here," Lisa said firmly. Mom let out this dramatic sigh, like she was the one being inconvenienced. Fine. She stepped inside and immediately turned her full attention to me. "Emily, I need your help," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. I just stared at her, completely caught off guard. "Help with what?" She sat down across from me, ignoring Lisa entirely. "I've got nowhere else to go," she said, as if that explained everything. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already had a sinking feeling I knew exactly where this was going. "Carl left me," she said, throwing her hands up like it was the most unfair thing in the world. "He took everything. The house, the money. I've been staying with a friend, but she's kicking me out because her daughter needs the room. I have no one else, Emily. You're my daughter. You're supposed to help me." I blinked at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You want to stay here?" "Yes," she said, like it was the most reasonable request in the world. "Just for a little while, until I can get back on my feet." Lisa, of course, didn't let her get away with it. "That's not happening," Lisa said, her tone as sharp as a knife. Mom whipped her head around to glare at her. "This isn't your decision." "Actually, it is," Lisa shot back. "This is my home, and you're not welcome here." Mom turned back to me, her voice rising. "Emily, I'm your mother. Do you really think it's fair to leave me out on the street after everything I've done for you?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe she had the audacity to say that. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked. She looked genuinely offended. "I raised you. I put a roof over your head, food on the table, just when you had no other choice. When my grandparents passed away," I interrupted. "Let's not pretend you were some kind of selfless saint." Her face turned red, and I could see the anger bubbling up. "I did the best I could." "No, you didn't," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You did the bare minimum, and even that felt like a chore for you. And now you think you can just show up here and expect me to save you?" She opened her mouth to argue, but Lisa stepped in before she could. "You need to leave," Lisa said, pointing to the door. Mom turned to me one last time, her voice trembling. "Emily, please. I'm your mother. Don't do this to me." I stood up, my hands shaking. "You already did this to yourself," I said. Lisa opened the door, and after a long, tense moment, my mom finally stormed out. Once the door was shut, I collapsed onto the couch, feeling like I'd just run a marathon. Lisa sat down next to me, patting my shoulder. "She's got some nerve." I nodded, too exhausted to say anything. I still can't believe how entitled she was. Like she genuinely thought I owed her something after everything she put me through. She didn't come to apologize or make amends. She came because she saw me as her backup plan, her safety net. I don't know if she'll try to contact me again, but I think this was the final nail in the coffin for our relationship. This chapter of my life is closed for me, and whatever she tries next, I'm not going to eat it up. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because, honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how someone can be so selfish.